The USS Duluth LPD-6 was in service to the United States Navy for 40 years, from 1965 to 2005. The ship was 569 feet long, 108 feet wide, was operated by 450 sailors, and typically carried 800 United States Marines and their equipment. This is the story and history of the ship's bell. Bells have a centuries-long tradition of varied use in the navies and merchant fleets of the world. Signaling, keeping time, and sounding alarms are important in a ship's routine and readiness. Their functional and ceremonial uses have made them a symbol of considerable significance to the United States Navy. Bells cast from metal were first developed in the Bronze Age, achieving a particularly high level of sophistication in China. During the European Middle Ages, they were used by Christians to signal divine services and make special announcements. Christian and Buddhist monasteries historically used them to regulate daily activity, conceptually similar to later timekeeping in the U.S. Navy. One of the earliest recorded mentions of the shipboard bell was on the British ship Grace Dieu about 1485. Some 10 years later, an inventory of the English ship Regent reveals that this ship carried 2 watch bells. Before the advent of the chronometer, time at sea was measured by the trickle of sand through a half hourglass. One of the ship's boys had the duty of watching the glass and turning it when the sand had run out. When he turned the glass, he struck the bell as a signal that he had performed this vital function. From this ringing of the bell as the glass was turned, evolved the tradition of striking the bell once at the end of the first half hour of a 4-hour watch, twice after the first hour, etc., until 8 bells marked the end of the 4-hour watch. The process was repeated for the succeeding watches. This age-old practice of sounding the bell on the hour and half-hour has its place in the nuclear and missile-oriented United States Navy at the dawn of the 21st century, regulating daily routine just as it did on our historic vessels under sail in the late 18th century. Common uses of the ship's bell included timekeeping, signaling, and emergencies. As shown in this chart, the bell is rung 2 times at 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, 4 times at 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 10 o'clock, 6 times at 3 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and 11 o'clock, and 8 times at 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, and 12 o'clock, with an additional single ring on each half hour. Most of the crew of a ship would be divided into 2 to 4 groups called watches. Each watch would take its turn with the essential activities of manning the helm, navigating, trimming sails, and keeping a lookout. The hours between 1600 and 2000 are so arranged because that watch, the dog watch, was divided in 2. The odd number of watches aimed to give each man a different watch each day. It also allowed the entire crew of a vessel to eat an evening meal, the normal time being at 1700, with first dog watchman eating at 1800. The sounding of a ship's bell found a natural application as a warning signal to other vessels in poor visibility and fog. In 1676, One Henry Teonage, serving as a chaplain in the British Mediterranean Fleet, recorded, "So great a fog that we were fain to ring our bells, beat drums, and fire muskets often to keep us from falling foul one upon another." Ringing a ship's bell in fog became customary. In 1858, British naval regulations made it mandatory in that function. Today, maritime law requires all ships to carry an efficient bell. American ships of the Revolutionary War period and our early national years adopted many of the practices and traditions of the British Royal Navy, including the use of bells. In 1798, Paul Revere cast a bell weighing 242 pounds for the frigate Constitution, also known today by its nickname, Old Ironsides. It is of interest to note that the use of a ship's bell contributed to the richest single prize captured by the American Navy during the War of Independence. While a Continental squadron under Commodore Whipple lay to, wrapped in Newfoundland fog in a July morning in 1779, the sound of ship's bells and an occasional signal gun could be heard a short distance off. When the fog lifted, the Americans discovered that they had fallen in with the richly laden enemy Jamaica fleet. 10 ships were captured as prizes, which, together with their cargo, were valued at more than $1 million. The bell is an essential link in a ship's emergency alarm system. In the event of a fire, the bell is rung rapidly for at least 5 seconds, followed by 1, 2, or 3 rings to indicate the location of a fire, forward, amidships, or aft respectively. The bell is used to signal the presence of important persons. When the ship's captain, a flag officer, or other important person arrives or departs, watchstanders make an announcement to the ship and ring the bell. This tradition extends to major naval command transitions, often held aboard vessels associated with the command. The bell's connection to religious origins continues. Originating in the British Royal Navy, it is a custom to baptize a child under the ship's bell. Sometimes the bell is used as a christening bowl filled with water for the ceremony. Once the baptism is completed, the child's name may be inscribed inside the bell. During naval ceremonies and events, the bell is used to signal the arrival and departure of a ship's captain, a flag officer, and other dignitaries. The British Royal Navy began the custom of baptizing children under the ship's bell. In some ceremonies, the bell is filled with water and used as the christening bowl. The child's name is sometimes inscribed inside the bell. On May 20th, 1987, Jessica Pursley, daughter of Yakina and bosun's mate 3rd Class Michael Pursley, was christened aboard USS Duluth LPD-6, with the event commemorated, in keeping with tradition, with an engraving on the inside of the ship's bell. Several other children were also christened aboard USS Duluth with the corresponding inscriptions inside the bell. These photos were taken during the christening of Jessica Pursley. Traditionally, the bell is maintained by the ship's cook, while the ship's whistle is maintained by the ship's bugler. In actual practice, The bell is maintained by a person of the ship's division charged with the upkeep of that part of the ship where the bell is located. In such a case, a deck seaman or quartermaster striker or signalman striker may have the bell shining duty. Aboard USS Duluth, the ship's bell was polished twice per day, every day, for 40 years. In addition to its shipboard roles, the bell serves a ceremonial and memorial function after the ship has served its Navy career. The bell remains with the ship while in service and with the Department of the Navy after decommissioning. In this way, an invisible tie is created between the country, the ship, and its citizens. U.S. Navy bells are part of the many artifacts removed from decommissioned vessels preserved by the Naval History and Heritage Command. Corresponding with the increase in size of naval vessels and the advent of electronic public address systems known as the 1MC, daily routine ship's bell functions, such as timekeeping, etc., are now accomplished using a smaller bell, which is located on the bridge when the ship is underway, and on the quarterdeck entrance to the ship in port. The main ship's bell, in modern use, is typically used during fog conditions and for formal ceremonial functions. Bells have been loaned or provided to churches as memorials to those vessels. This practice has been discontinued in favor of displaying bells with namesake states or municipalities, with museums, and with naval commands and newer namesake vessels. They may be provided on loan to new namesake ships, naval commands with an historical mission or functional connection, and to museums and other institutions that are interpreting specific historical themes and displays of naval history. Ships' bells remain the permanent property of the U.S. government and the Department of the Navy. These serve to inspire and to remind our naval forces and personnel of their honor, courage, and commitment to the defense of our nation. Ships' bells remain a powerful and tangible reminder of the history, heritage, and accomplishments of the naval service. One of the most numerous and symbolic artifacts in the Navy Historical Center's collection are the more than 2,000 ship's bells. Started before World War I, this collection is also one of the most utilized, with bells being found on display or in use in many interesting places. The Navy History and Heritage Command's Curator Branch preserves the bells, one of the many artifacts removed from decommissioned ships. They may be provided on loan to new namesake ships, naval commands with a historical mission or functional connection, and to museums and other institutions that are interpreting specific historical themes and displays of naval history. However, the bells remain the permanent property of the U.S. government and the Department of the Navy. The USS Duluth LPD-6 ship's bell measures 19 inches high, 21 inches in diameter, and weighs 174 pounds. This video is presented by the USS Duluth Crew Members Association. Please visit our website at www.ussduluth.org.